Chapter VII Father and Son, by Charles Dickens. Only evening in the month of March, 1798, that dark time in Ireland's annals whose memory, overlooking all minor subsequent emeutes, is still preserved among us, as the year of the rebellion. A lady and gentleman were seated near a blazing fire in the old-fashioned dining-room of a large lonely mansion. They had just dined. Wine and fruit were on the table, both untouched, while Mr. Hewson and his wife sat silently gazing at the fire, watching its flickering light becoming gradually more vivid as the short spring twilight faded into darkness. At length the husband poured out a glass of wine, drank it off, and then broke silence by saying, "Well, well, Charlotte, these are awful times. There were 10 men taken up today for burning Carter's house at Knockin, and Tom Dicer says that every magistrate in the country is a marked man." Mrs. Hewson cast a frightened glance towards the windows, which opened nearly to the ground, and gave a view of the wide, tree-besprinkled lawn, through whose centre a long straight avenue led to the high road. There was also a footpath at either side of the house, branching off through close thickets of trees, and reaching the road by a circuitous route. "Listen, James," she said after a pause, "what noise is that?" "Nothing but the sighing of the wind among the trees. Come, wife, you must not give way to imaginary fears." "But really I heard something like footsteps on the gravel, round the gable end. I wish—" A knock at the parlour door interrupted her. "Come in." The door opened, and Tim Gahan, Mr. Hewson's confidential steward and right-hand man, entered, followed by a fair-haired, delicate-looking boy of 6 years old, dressed in deep mourning. "Well, Gahan, what do you want?" "I ask your honour's pardon for disturbing you and the mistress, but I thought it right to come tell you the bad news I heard." "Something about the rebels, I suppose?" "Yes, sir, I got a whisper just now that there's going to be a great rising entirely tomorrow. Thousands are to gather before daybreak at Kilcrean Bog, where I'm told they have a power of pikes hiding, and then they're to march on and sack every house in the country. I'll engage, when I heard it, I didn't let the grass grow under my feet, but came off straight to your honour, thinking maybe you'd like to walk over this fine evening to Mr. Warren's, and settle with him what's best to be done." "Oh, James, I beseech you, don't think of going." "Make your mind easy, Charlotte, I don't intend it, not that I suppose there would be much risk, but all things considered I think I'm just as comfortable at home." The steward's brow darkened, as he glanced nervously towards the end window, which, jutting out in the gable, formed a deep angle in the outer wall. "Of course 'tis just as your honour pleases, but I'll warrant you there would be no harm in going. Come, Billy," he added, addressing the child, who by this time was standing close to Mrs. Hewson, "make your bow and bid good night to master and mistress." The boy did not stir, and Mrs. Hewson, taking his little hand in hers, said, "You need not go home for half an hour, Gahan. Stay and have a chat with the servants in the kitchen and leave little Billy with me, and with the apples and nuts," she added, smiling as she filled the child's hands with fruit. "Thank you, ma'am," said the steward hastily. "I can't stop, I'm in a hurry home where I wanted to leave this brat tonight, but he would follow me. Come, Billy, come this minute, you young rogue." Still the child looked reluctant, and Mr. Hewson said peremptorily, "Don't go yet, Gahan. I want to speak to you by and by, and you know the mistress always likes to pet little Billy." Without replying, the steward left the room, and the next moment his hasty footsteps resounded through the long flagged passage that led to the offices. "There's something strange about Gahan since his wife died," remarked Mrs. Hewson. "I suppose 'tis grief for her that makes him look so darkly, and seem almost jealous when anyone speaks to his child. Poor little Billy, your mother was a sore loss to you." The child's blue eyes filled with tears, and pressing closer to the lady's side, he said, "Old Peggy doesn't wash and dress me as nicely as Mammy used." "But your father is good to you." "Oh yes, ma'am, but he's out all day busy, and I've no one to talk to me as Mammy used, for Peggy is quite deaf, and besides she's always busy with the pigs and chickens. I wish I had you, Billy, to take care of, and to teach, for your poor mother's sake." "And so you may, Charlotte," said her husband. "I'm sure Gahan, with all his odd ways, is too sensible a fellow not to know how much it would be for his child's benefit to be brought up and educated by us, and the boy would be an amusement to us in this lonely house. I'll speak to him about it before he goes home. Billy, my fine fellow, come here," he continued, "jump up on my knee, and tell me if you'd like to live here always, and learn to read and write." I would, sir, if I could be with father too. So you shall, and what about old Peggy? The child paused. I'd like to give her a penn'orth of snuff and a piece of tobacco every week, for she said the other day that that would make her quite happy. Mr. Hewson laughed, and Billy prattled on, still seated on his knee, when a noise of footsteps on the ground, mingled with low suppressed talking, was heard outside. James, listen, there's the noise again. It was now nearly dark, but Mr. Hewson, still holding the boy in his arms, walked towards the window and looked out. I can see nothing, he said. Stay, there are figures moving off among the trees, and a man running round to the back of the house. Very like Gahan he is too. Seizing the bell rope, he rang it loudly, and said to the servant who answered his summons, Fasten the shutters and put up the bars, Connell, and then tell Gahan I want to see him. The man obeyed, candles were brought, and Gahan entered the room. Mr. Hewson remarked that though his cheeks were flushed, his lips were very white, and his bold dark eyes were cast on the ground. What took you round the house just now, Tim? Asked his master in a careless manner. What took me round the house, is it? Why then, nothing in life, sir, but that just as I went outside the kitchen door to take a smoke, I saw the pigs that Shaneen forgot to put up in their sty, making right for the mistress' flower garden, so I just put my dudheen, lighting as it was, into my pocket and ran after them. I caught them on the grand walk under the end window, and indeed, ma'am, I had my own share of work turning them back to their proper sphere. Gahan spoke with unusual volubility, but without raising his eyes from the ground. Who were the people, asked his master, whom I saw moving through the western grove? People, your honour, not a sign of any people moving there, I'll be bound, barring the pigs. Then, said Mr. Hewson, smiling to his wife, the miracle of Circe must have been reversed, and swine turned into men, for undoubtedly the dark figures I saw were human beings. Come, Billy, said Gahan, anxious to turn the conversation, will you come home with me now? I am sure 'twas very good of the mistress to give you all them fine apples. Mrs. Hewson was going to propose Billy's remaining, but her husband whispered, Wait till tomorrow, so Gahan and his child were allowed to depart. Next morning the magistrates of the district were on the alert, and several suspicious-looking men found lurking about were taken up. A hat which fitted one of them was picked up in Mr. Hewson's grove. The gravel under the end window bore many signs of trampling feet, and there were marks on the wall as if guns had rested against it. Gahan's information touching the intended meeting at Kilcrean Bog proved to be totally without foundation, and after a careful search not a single pike or weapon of any description could be found there. All these circumstances combined certainly looked suspicious, but after a long investigation, as no guilt could be actually brought home to Gahan, he was dismissed. One of his examiners, however, said privately, I advise you take care of that fellow, Hewson. If I were in your place, I'd just trust him as far as I could throw him, and not an inch beyond. An indolent, hospitable Irish country gentleman, such as Mr. Hewson, is never without an always shrewd and often roguish Prime Minister, who saves his master the trouble of looking after his own affairs, and manages everything that is to be done in both the home and foreign departments, from putting a new door to the pigsty, to letting a farm of 100 acres on lease. Now in this, or rather these capacities, Gahan had long served Mr. Hewson, and some 7 years previous to the evening on which our story commences, he had strengthened the tie and increased his influence considerably by marrying Mrs. Hewson's favourite and faithful maid. One child was the result of this union, and Mrs. Hewson, who had no family of her own, took much interest in little Billy, more especially after the death of his mother, who, poor thing, the neighbours said, was not very happy, and would gladly, if she dared, have exchanged her lonely cottage for the easy service of her former mistress. Thus, though for a time Mr. and Mrs. Hewson regarded Gahan with some doubt, the feeling gradually wore away, and the steward regained his former influence. After the lapse of a few stormy months, the rebellion was quelled. All the prisoners taken up were severally disposed of by hanging, transportation, or acquittal, according to the nature and amount of the evidence brought against them, and the country became as peaceful as it is in the volcanic nature of our Irish soil ever to be. The Hewsons' kindness towards Gahan's child was steady and unchanged. They took him into their house, and gave him a plain but solid education, so that William, while yet a boy, was enabled to be of some use to his patron, and daily enjoyed more and more of his confidence. Another evening, the 20th anniversary of that with which this narrative commenced, came round. Mr. and Mrs. Hewson were still hale and active, dwelling in their hospitable home. About 8 o'clock at night, Tim Gahan, now a stooping, grey-haired man, entered Mr. Hewson's kitchen and took his seat on the corner of the settle near the fire. The cook, directing a silent, significant glance of compassion towards her fellow servants, said, "Would you like a drink of cider, Tim, or will you wait and take a cup of tea with myself and Kitty?" The old man's eyes were fixed on the fire, and a wrinkled hand was planted firmly on each knee, as if to check their involuntary trembling. "I'll not drink anything this night, thank you kindly, Nelly," he said, in a slow, musing manner, dwelling long on each word. "Where's Billy?" he asked after a pause in a quick, hurried tone, looking up suddenly at the cook with an expression in his eyes which, as she afterwards said, took away her breath. "Oh, never heed Billy, I suppose he's busy with the master." "Where's the use, Nelly," said the coachman, "in hiding it from him? Sure, sooner or later he must know it. Tim," he continued, "God knows 'tis sorrow to my heart this blessed night to make yours sore, but the truth is that William has done what he oughtn't to do to the man that was all one as a father to him." "What has he done? What will you dare say again, my boy?" "Taken money, then," replied the coachman, "that the master had marked and put by in his desk, for he suspected this some time past that gold was missing. This morning 'twas gone, a search was made, and the marked guineas were found with your son William." The old man covered his face with his hands, and rocked himself to and fro. "Where is he now?" at length he asked in a hoarse voice. "Locked up safe in the inner storeroom. The master intends sending him to jail early tomorrow morning." "He will not," said Gahan slowly, "kill the boy that saved his life. No, no. Poor fellow, the grief is setting his mind astray, and sure no wonder," said the cook compassionately. "I'm not astray," cried the old man fiercely. "Where's the master? Take me to him." "Come with me," said the butler, "and I'll ask him will he see you." With faltering steps the father complied, and when they reached the parlour he trembled exceedingly and leant against the wall for support, while the butler opened the door and said, "Gahan is here, sir, and wants to know will you let him speak to you for a minute." "Tell him to come in," said Mr. Hewson, in a solemn tone of sorrow, very different from his ordinary cheerful voice. "Sir," said the steward, advancing, "they tell me you are going to send my boy to prison, is it true?" "Too true indeed, Gahan. The lad who was reared in my house, whom my wife watched over in health and nursed in sickness, whom we loved almost as if he were our own, has robbed us, and that not once or twice but many times. He is silent and sullen too, and refuses to tell why he stole the money, which was never withheld from him when he wanted it. I can make nothing of him, and must only give him up to justice in the morning." "No, sir, no, the boy saved your life, you can't take his." "You're raving, Gahan." "Listen to me, sir, and you won't say so. You remember this night 20 years. I came here with my motherless child, and yourself and the mistress pitied us and spoke loving words to him. Well for us all you did so. That night, little you thought it. I was banded with them that were sworn to take your life. They were watching you outside the window, and I was sent to inveigle you out that they might shoot you. A faint heart I had for the bloody business, for you were ever and always a good master to me. But I was under an oath to them that I daren't break, supposing they ordered me to shoot my own mother. Well, the hand of God was over you and you wouldn't come with me. I ran out to them and I said, 'Boys, if you want to shoot him you must do it through the window,' thinking they'd be afeard of that. But they weren't, they were daring fellows, and one of them, sheltered by the angle of the window, took deadly aim at you. At that very moment you took Billy on your knee, and I saw his fair head on a line with the musket. I don't know exactly then what I said or did, but I remember I caught the man's hand, threw it up and pointed to the child. Knowing I was a determined man, I believed they didn't wish to provoke me. So they watched you for a while, and when you didn't put him down they got daunted, hearing the sound of soldiers riding by the road, and they stole away through the grove. Most of that gang swung on the gallows, but the last of them died this morning quietly in his bed. Up to yesterday he used to make me give him money, sums of money to buy his silence, and it was for that I made my boy a thief. It was wearing out his very life. Often he went down on his knees to me and said, 'Father, I'd die myself sooner than rob my master, but I can't see you disgraced. Oh, let us fly the country. Now, sir, I have told you all, do what you like with me, send me to jail, I deserve it, but spare my poor, deluded, innocent boy.'" It would be difficult to describe Mr. Hewson's feelings, but his wife's first impulse was to hasten to liberate the prisoner. With a few incoherent words of explanation, she led him into the presence of his master, who, looking at him sorrowfully but kindly, said, "William, you have erred deeply, but not so deeply as I supposed. Your father has told me everything. I forgive him freely, and you also." The young man covered his face with his hands, and wept tears more bitter and abundant than he had ever shed since the day when he followed his mother to the grave. He could say but little, but he knelt on the ground, and clasping the kind hand of her who had supplied to him that mother's place, he murmured, "Will you tell him I would rather die than sin again?" Old Gahan died 2 years afterwards, truly penitent, invoking blessings on his son and on his benefactors, and the young man's conduct, now no longer under evil influence, was so steady and so upright, that his adopted parents felt that their pious work was rewarded, and that in William Gahan they had indeed a son.